to Deepa.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chair Emeritus Clark Lee. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but Clark helped us come up with our caucus's field plan so that we could really take a leadership role in defeating this recall, because of course this recall has massive consequences for our community specifically. So with that, I actually want to give a few shout outs. So Trustee Mike Fong and former API Caucus Chair is in the house. Former API Caucus Chair Maylee Tom also with us. Thank you for joining. Our Filipino American Democratic Caucus Chair Nate Epstein. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have your meeting tonight. Thank you, Children's Caucus Chair Ann Crosby for being here. I see Progressive Caucus Chair Amar Shergill also here. I think I also saw Igor Trega from the Environmental Caucus here. I want to shout him out as well. With that, I actually wanted to ask folks, if you have any reasons for why this recall is important to you, please drop it in the chat. We'd like to know why this is important to you. I will say that, making calls to Democrats through our phone banks, it's been really rewarding. I urge you to join us. It's they're friendly people on the phone who thank me for my time and thank me for volunteering. Just getting the word out to our voters that this is happening and what the implications are for our community is a really huge deal. I also want to shout out the Newsom campaign for actually doing in-language materials. So they have spots in Korean and Mandarin and Cantonese, as far as I know, and I can drop some materials that they've came up with. I hope you all have access to it, but really great that the Newsom campaign is not taking our community for granted and in fact has stood with us. Really great to be led by Governor Newsom. And thank you so much, Clark, for being here and doing this with us for the recall. Next, I want to invite our Vice Chair and Controller to give a few remarks. Betty.
Thank you, Deepa. Good afternoon, API Caucus, and really an honor to join all of you today. And thank you to all of you, the officers of this caucus, for your leadership, to Clark for the outstanding presentation, and just everything that we are doing for the next 19 days to defeat this recall. This is a priority. A lot is at stake, as you all know. And it's not just about the issues, but it's also about governance and just some of the choices that likely will have to face a governor coming up, and that certainly may include making political appointments. And so there's just a lot that hangs on the balance. But I just wanted to say a couple things about this recall, because I think for all of us, reaching out to just our natural networks and being able to just turn out the vote, it's a turnout election. And to be able to just do our relational organizing as we feel comfortable doing. I know we're going to have mobilization nights as well, or days to get out the vote. But I want to just thank the CDP staff for the tremendous work and just getting all these tools together. The campaign has been spectacular with the in-language resources. And one of the reasons why I think Governor Newsom really there is so much to say about the other side, that I think at the end of the day, people want to vote for something. And what we are voting for is to keep Governor Newsom in office. What we are voting for is somebody who has been a tremendous advocate for our community. It's been a very, very challenging year for all of us in the API community, and year and a half. Frankly, with the COVID pandemic and the increasing incidences of API hate, violence, Governor Newsom just doubled down and stood with us. The $156 million of the equity budget for the API community that he funded in the budget, but also just really shooting down every argument from the other side, anti-immigrant, anti-women, just not respectful of workers. And so, the best way we're going to do this turnout is just really peer-to-peer, our natural networks, and certainly we're trusted voices for our own communities. So just really happy that all of you are going to recommit after this e-board meeting to do what we got to do. To recommit after the board meeting to do what we have to do to just get to the other side of this recall. And then lastly, what I wanted to say is, we have throughout the board meeting actions that will be taking place all weekend, and feel free to take those and think about initiating one on your own, whether it's to do what Tammy is suggesting in terms of inviting people to already scheduled events. But I know there are many who are feeling inspired about being able to reach out to voters, and they are focused now. The early ballot returns look promising, but we are going to keep going and be sure that we get the turnout we need so that we get 50% +1 on question 1, and hope enough to make question 2 irrelevant and moot. So thank you to all of you for the great work that you're doing. And I know you've got a panel coming up on redistricting. This is what's great about this caucus. We don't lose sleep over any of these issues because we have to kind of be at the forefront of all of them. And so representation matters. And I hope that all of you will continue to pay attention on redistricting, but the road to be blue in 22 is to essentially slay this recall on September 14th. So really happy to join all of you, Deepa, and thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Controller Betty, for joining us and always supporting our caucus. So next, I want to invite Maria Abadesco to provide an update about an initiative that she is working on. Maria, if you wouldn't mind at this time.
Okay, here we are. Thank you, Deepa, and the caucus. I think everyone has in their packet that I'm working on an initiative, Fairness for Injured Patients Act. It's going to be on the 2022 ballot initiative. And basically, it's an initiative that puts patients back in control of malpractice issues. As we know, medical boards have been controlled by doctors and insurances. So last night, the Disability Caucus endorsed the initiative, and we're just hoping that folks will study the issue and understand it better as we move into 2022. I think that's about it for now. I want to thank you for your time. Again, it's a 40-year-old law, and it's got a cap on it. For malpractice and such, it's a $250,000 cap. And again, given things that are going on with patient care and healthcare, we really need to have patients more in control of their own destiny and of issues of concern as it pertains to malpractice and insurance. Thank you. Thank you, Deepa.
Thank you, Maria, for joining us and educating us. Next, we have DNC AAPI Outreach Director, Eric Salcedo, who's joined us. And thank you so much for joining, Eric. And please, if you wouldn't mind giving us an update about everything that you're working on. I know it's a lot.
Thank you, Deepa. Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Before I begin, I just want to echo the sentiments I'm sure many have said earlier about the loss of service members and civilians in Kabul this morning. Our hearts go out to their families and their loved ones and to all impacted by the tragedy. And just that we're ever grateful and thankful for all of U.S. Armed Service members for risking their lives on a daily basis to protect our rights and freedoms. With that, if you asked me last week what we were doing, I was going to talk about Orange County for California, but now it's all about September 14th. And we are pushing out all of the phone banks that many of the CalDem API groups are hosting and carrying on. And I've already been contacting other groups like folks in Nevada, and everyone is excited and anxious to help California, because for many election cycles, California has been our heavy, our not to put in military terms, but the cavalry that came and helped us and APIs become the margin of victory in battleground states such as Georgia, such as Arizona, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And everyone is going to be excited and willing to finally be able to reciprocate and help the California API Caucus hold on to the governorship and keep California blue. So with that, and then after on September 15th, it will be Orange County.
Thank you so much, Eric. Yes, and as we've talked about Orange County being a priority as a pathway to keeping the House. So California is important, because yes, we're a state of 40 million people, but we're important to the national Democratic Party scene too, and the API community is integral to that. Thank you so much, Eric, for all the work that you do. Next, I want to shout out our former party secretary, Jenny Bach, for being here in front of the caucus. I also want to ask folks, if you're interested in saying a few words about, why this recall matters to you and maybe what you're doing and to getting folks out to vote, we'd love to hear from you. So if you wouldn't mind, raising your hand and sharing with us your experience in getting folks out to vote and why this recall matters to you, that would be really great. Anyone? Okay, Supervisor Otto Lee, please. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much, Deepa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for that. And this recall is really, really important. And what we are also learning about the recall is not only about the governor. When you look around statewide and locally, many of our school board members are being recalled. As a matter of fact, I just joined that club last week, now that they want to recall every supervisor in the Clark County. And this past Tuesday, after the San Jose City Council voted to have some vaccine issued mandates, now they want to recall the council members as well. So this is by far a far greater movement of recall of not just the governor, but basically the entire system of local government as well. I think this is a message I think we need to get to everybody, to let them understand that these folks are not just about Gavin Newsom. These guys are about recalling everything that we believe in democracy. And they don't like the results of democracy, and they're trying to get everybody out of office using this. So I think it is so important for Democrats, non-Democrats, and many even Republicans to realize this is about the way of life that they're affecting right now. We are just trying to get out of COVID. Delta is very much alive and well, and there's so many issues around that we are working so hard. As a county supervisor, one of my main job, of course, is to get the vaccines to our community, and we've got over 80.6% of our county has been fully vaccinated. 86% of our county has gotten at least one vaccine. These are huge numbers. We're very proud of it, and we want to continue our great work. And just like what the governor has been doing, helping us get the vaccines, getting those firefighters out there to help the wildfire victims, we are the ones who are doing the hard work. So just get the word out to people. We are truly out there fighting for our residents every day, and that's why it's so important. All they have to do is mark no and mail the envelope. When they ask you about who to vote for on the back, don't worry about it. Just like none of them's acceptable. Just say no, mail in, and that's all they have to do. Get out the votes really all that matters at this point. Just want to get the word out, and thank you so much for letting me speak, Deepa.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Lee, and fellow Hastings alum.
Yay.
Next, I want to recognize CYD President Diane Lay. I have to let you know that there are so many young Dems on this board. So, we are so grateful for your leadership in particular. Diane, please, if you would mind sharing a few remarks with us.
Sure. So, like she said, my name is Diane. I'm the president of the California Young Democrats. I'm actually the first API and woman president of CYD in the last 10 years. So it's not lost on me what that impact means. And as soon as we heard the date of September 14th, we absolutely hit the ground running and mobilized immediately. We've already done a dozen phone banks across the state, and we're planning to do more. On Tuesday, we hosted an event with Governor Newsom, and it was a one-on-one conversation with myself and the governor. And then afterwards, we pivoted to all of us phone banking, and we had 100 people on. And we are doing everything that we can. We've been calling voters 18 to 35 years old. We know that young people are the margin of victory, and the more young people we can get to turn in their ballots, and we will be able to overcome and defeat this ridiculous recall. So that is what CYD has been doing.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we applaud you as a trailblazer in our community as well. Next, I want to welcome Assembly Member Alex Lee, Assembly Member from my hometown of Fremont. Assembly Member Lee, please take it away.
All right, there we go. I can unmute. Hey, everyone. I just want to stop by and say thank you so much for all the work you're doing to oppose the recall right now. Every vote really, really matters. Right now, with the early returns, Democrats are leading, even with the Republicans and non-party preference people combined together. And that's probably a good indication, but it's super early and we have to keep up that momentum. So remind your friends, your family to turn in their ballot. Fun enough, my brother just turned 18, so it's actually his first election, and he has a vote in such a strange election for the first one. But that's why there's so many great opportunities for people to vote. And the one thing I'll say why it's so important that we not have a Republican governor or any of the people listed, even the Democrat that's leading, is, it would be a complete disaster. I'll just tell you that. Is like, I'm sure many of us have worked in so many ways to ask the governor, use your executive orders and your emergency powers to do X, Y, Z. Okay, now imagine a Republican governor who was not shy to use any of those things, and we in the legislature and judicial branch have to just fight back, right? And it'll be such a mess where we will be taken back so far on our workers' rights and our public health orders. And imagine the mess with the EDD will get even worse with so many people still rely on unemployment. There's just so many things that we have worked so hard this year to get this far. And obviously things aren't perfect, but just to get this far has been a struggle. Now imagine someone who, and the GOP has acknowledged it this much, their entire strategy is not exactly to just govern. Their strategy is to burn everything down. When they say they don't want to debate, some of them say they don't want to debate each other. Their only enemy is Gavin Newsom. That is true. Their only enemy is to go in and do everything that we have done as the people of California and really make a mess of things. So really, everything is at stake right now. So please remember to vote no and get your friends to turn in their ballots. So thank you so much, Deepa, for inviting me on. And thank you all for all the great work you do. And keep out there and keep knocking on doors, keep texting people, keep calling people.
Thank you, Assemblymember Lee. Next, I want to recognize Tai Sinanan for providing a few remarks. Please let us know why is this recall so important to you and why should we be involved?
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of you folks don't know me. My name is Tai Sinanan. I'm your newest member. One of the founders of Thai Town in Los Angeles. And another fun fact is Adam Ma and I went to school back in the day, I think middle school and high school in Glendale. So no surprise that Adam is a community leader and a leader among you folks and in KDEM. So bravo, Adam. So good seeing you after what, 20 plus years? Not that I want to date ourselves, but here's what I do want to say. I'm on the e-board of the Veterans Caucus, and I'm an officer in the Air Force that's helping to disseminate the COVID vaccine across Southern California. And one of the things that I'm doing as I get to disseminate it to about 150 hospitals, clinics, and veterans groups, I get to talk about the vote no on recall. So I would say two things that have worked really well for me, apart from what you all do, which is brilliant, is get on a podcast and write an op-ed. Get on a podcast, get on local op-ed pieces and do it now, because many of them require at least a 2-week turnaround for you to get on to their online submission. It's been working well for me here in Southern California, both in Riverside, OC, and San Diego, getting in on as many podcasts as possible, because at this point is a numbers game. The last two things I'll say is I'm preaching to the choir, so nothing new for you all, but one fun fact that I learned from the Veterans Caucus meeting yesterday that blew my mind away was this. The governor has the ability to appoint 300 individuals to committees and commissions. Those 300 people run the gamut on controlling and or persuading legislation, policy at the state, local level across public education, across infrastructure, across the environment. For instance, the governor has the ability to appoint the committee that dictates the curriculum for public K through 12 schools in California, all right? Imagine anyone else on this ballot winning over Gavin Newsom. That individual now has the autonomy to dictate public school curriculum K through 12 here in the state of California. So that just blew my mind away. Podcast newsletters, and I just want to give a shout out to our very own Maria Abodesco that said that the recall is a GOP strategy. Absolutely 100%. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you for becoming a member of our caucus. We really appreciate it. Next, I want to recognize Oakland Council member Shang Tao, who will be on a panel later, but thank you so much for joining us, Council member.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for having me. I am Shang Tao, Oakland Council member. And, I think that obviously we're preaching to the choir here, but for me, the recall, it's incredibly important to not sit this one out. And I think that what we can do is really touch base with our family and our friends, make sure that it becomes a ripple effect, to make sure that they touch base with their family and friends, really, going back to the basics. And, saying that even if you don't, if you have capacity to volunteer, please do it. If you have capacity to lit drop, please do it, whatever you can do. But the word of mouth is incredibly important. And, for me, it's about, and when I talk to my siblings who are not really, don't really understand or don't have the capacity and time to know what's happening at the local government level or at the state level or even at the federal level, I tell them that if you care about science, then you cannot sit this one out, because you must vote no. If you care, it doesn't matter whether or not it's not about Newsom anymore, right? It's about if you care about fighting global warming, if you care about a more just future for your children, your grandchildren, if you care about protecting women's rights, then you will vote no, right? And all of this is very self-explanatory. I think that, once you get to that core around like whether it's a Democrat or Republican or Newsom or someone else, and you just get to the core values of what people care about, then their radar, the red flag pops up, and they'll do their research, or maybe just vote, but they'll do their research in regards to who are the other people who are running against Gavin, right? Look at and so you can pick out any one of the people who's running against Gavin, and they don't care about any of the things that I just stated earlier. And so I think that that's incredibly important when we talk to our family and our friends, that we actually talk about it in a way where it makes sense to each one's daily lives and what they care about and their values.
Thank you so much, Council member Shang Tao. And we'll be hearing more from her in just a few minutes. I now want to recognize my fellow caucus chair and someone I had the pleasure of organizing with back in the day, Chair Ann Crosby. Try muting.
Sorry about that. It was
No.
telling me that you're not allowed to unmute. I'm like, no, I'm trying to. She's asking me to. Anyway, thank you. First of all, I 100% just want to congratulate this caucus for choosing such a wonderful chair. She is another person who Fremont is very proud to have had as a part of our community for so long, and just my heart warms for you that you're lucky enough to have her in a leadership position. Deepa's a wonderful person. The reason I wanted to speak a little bit, I served as a school board trustee in Fremont in the Bay Area up until last December, especially when the pandemic was first starting. And it was super challenging. And if we hadn't had the governor that we did, it could have been so much worse for California. And because Fremont has such a large API community and a large group of people from China specifically, who went for New Year's and then came back, and we were getting panicked messages as trustees saying, you have to close the schools, you have to close the schools. This is so dangerous, you don't know. And as a trustee, we were like, okay, I don't understand, I don't get it. But then pretty quickly, the governor did make it possible for schools to be closed down. And during that summer, while we were closed, we had adults who were getting COVID and were getting very sick. And that was before the Delta variant even. And people were coming to us and saying, why aren't you opening schools? Why aren't you opening schools? It's like, you don't know, this thing is really bad. And if we can't control it before we even have kids on campus, we can't open schools. So seeing it from that side and seeing everything that our schools have gone through and all of the protests that we have had from parents that are very unhappy, they want things to be back to normal, they want their kids in school, they want to be able to go back to work. You know, I feel a huge amount of sympathy. But at the same time, we need people to be vaccinated. And the governor has been saying, no, school employees, you need to be vaccinated. So if we did not have that governor, we would really be in a world of hurt. And if he doesn't stay in office, that's where we're going to be. Because there's a clown car of individuals on deck who really want to not have those kind of requirements for our schools. And it's all you have to do is look at, the states where those requirements are not in place, and you'll see just how really devastating it is for the children. So as Children's Caucus Chair, please, please, please do everything you can to be involved in making sure that that doesn't happen. Talk to friends, family, vote no, and then get on the phones to help make sure that this does not happen, because it's our next generation that are really impacted. So thank you for the time, Deepa. Thank you again for allowing me a chance to say a word. Thank you.
Thank you, Children's Caucus Chair Ann Crosby. You've always been really passionate about our schools. And thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Now I want to kick it over to our next portion of our meeting to where we're going to talk about redistricting. As I mentioned earlier, redistricting implicates our community's political power, and things are happening right now. I think it's really important for our community to be engaged. So I want to introduce our moderator for the evening, our legislative director, Olivia Lee. And, she needs no introduction, but I will introduce her anyway. So Olivia Lee is the manager, legislative advocacy affairs for Ultimate Health Services, where she co-leads COVID-19 and vaccination efforts for the Government Relations Department and focuses on local, state, and federal issues impacting accessibility to quality healthcare for all. A public policy and public affairs professional, Lee was previously a public policy manager at the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, covering land use, housing, homelessness, and technology innovation. Additionally, Lee has held positions with the California State Assembly, Kaufman Legal Group, Hilltop Public Solutions, the California Democratic Party, and many federal and state campaigns. First generation American, Olivia Lee has 20 plus years of community engagement and political activism experience at federal, state, and local levels. As an activist, she is the co-chair of the California Democratic Party's Rules Committee, and she is the recording secretary of the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. She's the first API countywide officer and the youngest person to hold the position. And she was a Democratic National Convention district level delegate in 2016. And in 2020, she served in several volunteer roles, including Center for Asian American United for Self-Empowerment, Leadership Network member, Asian Professional Exchange Communications Chair, and Los Angeles City Housing Element Task Force member. She attended Mount San Antonio College and graduated from the University of California, Irvine, and she's a San Gabriel Valley resident. Legislative Director Olivia Lee, we look forward to the panel you are moderating today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Deepa, and welcome everyone. We are so excited to kick off this very timely discussion on redistricting with our esteemed panelists. So what I'm going to do is give a quick intro of each of our speakers at this time. The first speaker, she actually just spoke a couple minutes ago, the Honorable Shang Tao. She was elected in 2018 to the Oakland City Council District 4. She's the first Hmong American woman elected to City Council in California and the first Hmong to be elected in Oakland. And in her first year in office, the council member fought for more resources for Oakland's unhoused community, fought for wildfire prevention policies, including underground utilities and high fire severity risk zones, and ensuring the city prioritizes wildfire prevention, helped pass policies to incentivize immediate response, immediate increase in housing options in Oakland, created equity programs and incentives for the changing cannabis industry. So thank you so much for being here, council member. And then, well, our next panelist is the Honorable Dr. Suli Saro. She was elected last year as the first Cambodian American elected official in Long Beach history, representing Long Beach City Council District 6. This is a milestone as Long Beach has hosted the nation's largest concentration of Cambodian American refugees. Dr. Saro's priorities in interim office includes providing pandemic relief, focusing in particular on obtaining access to food and job opportunities for constituents while remaining sensitive to different cultural and language needs. Her vision also includes working to tackle Long Beach City's most challenging issues such as economic development, affordable housing, homelessness, and violence. Next up, we have Paul Mitchell. He is the Vice President of Political Data, Inc. and the owner of Redistricting Partners. He was also just named in the Capital Weekly Top 100 for 2021 as of today, so congratulations. He has conducted redistricting for more than 35 cities, school boards, and community college districts. The firm's work on racially polarized voting analyses and demographics has aided dozens of agencies as they navigate the California and federal voting rights acts. He also works with nonprofit organizations in building community engagement and working throughout California on elections and voting issues. So welcome. And our last but not least, our panelist is Adam Ma. He works in external affairs for the private sector and previously a senior political advisor to then Congress member Javier Becerra and California Senate President Pro Tempore Kevin De Leon. He was also the campaign manager for Jeff Prang for LA County Assessor and worked on the Judy Chu for Congress special election campaign and for the LA County Federation of Labor, and of course, our vice chair of our caucus. So welcome. So to kick off the discussion, Paul, could you help us level set a bit and give us an overview of redistricting, what it is, and just so we get a good sense of the land that we're talking about here?
Yeah, that's great. I've got some slides that I'll share if that's okay. Let's see, can you see those? There we go.
Still loading. There we are.
There we go. Great. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Our firm, as you mentioned, Redistricting Partners, is doing a lot of local redistricting and some statewide redistricting around the country. And it's a really exciting time for redistricting. It's come out of the cigar-filled back rooms and really come into the public space, which is exciting. I think a lot of community-based organizations are much more adept at being able to influence the process. Media is much more able to cover it. And that creates a great blend for us to be able to have redistricting that can kind of take away some of that traditional kind of backroom politics from the process and make it more of something that works to serve the public for the 10 years that those lines take effect and are in control for. So first off, just a little state overview of redistricting. The Statewide Redistricting Commission has been seated and is working now, taking community of interest testimony under the rules of Propositions 11 and 20 that give them the control over drawing legislative, congressional, and Board of Equalization districts, but set out processes for them. They set out guidelines in terms of the structure of, the hearings they have to have, the timeline they have to follow, some of those process elements, and also how they are to consider different criteria when they draw lines. And it's all done to ensure that it's an open, transparent process where they're not allowed to draw districts based on incumbents or partisan outcomes. And it really is a model for the rest of the country. It's, in my mind, the gold standard of what we can do to bring redistricting to the fore as a public engagement with commissioners who are highly engaged, skilled, but also not kind of being pulled by the puppet strings of politicians and organizations. The commission is bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, but it actually, it skews towards social justice and it skews towards those community-based organizations. A lot of the commissioners come out of academics and community-based work. And as a result, they're much more in tune with some of the issues that will probably drive the redistricting process around the Voting Rights Act and ensuring minority communities have a voice in eventual district lines. The challenges the commission's going to have are many. One is that we have a slower rate of growth in the rest of the country. So we did lose a congressional seat, which will be an issue for this new commission. But also the population growth shifted in the state with slower rates of population growth in LA and parts of Northern California, and then higher rates of growth in the Inland Empire and parts of the Bay Area. There's also a change in the rules with the Voting Rights Act that will, in some ways, make the commission's job a little bit easier, but also place more emphasis on other parts of the Voting Rights Act, mainly Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The ethnic changes in the state are pretty enormous. A rapid growth of Latino population almost everywhere. Significant growth of the API community, particularly in the most historic Asian communities where you see the density growing faster than in other parts of the state. And then for the Black population in the state, you see a growth of population, but it's also dispersing, which from a redistricting perspective makes it harder to draw districts where you can ensure that that community is able to elect a candidate of choice. So from a redistricting perspective, these ethnic changes in the state have a big impact on the process. When we look back nationally, the redistricting picture is even crazier. Nationally, Republicans have a structural advantage because there are more states where they have what are called trifectas, which is where they control the governor's office and the different houses of the legislature. There are more commissions. Maybe the most like California would be the Michigan Commission, but there's also new commissions in Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, and an existing commission in Arizona. There's commissions work being done in Washington and other states. And that should impact some of the line drawing. We're hoping that in a lot of those states, and a couple of those states we're working in, we're hoping that that line drawing will reflect communities and not just become the same old political kind of gerrymandering. The impact of the redistricting really can't be underestimated. In the House of Representatives in Congress will likely be determined by the redistricting. I think most people estimate that we could see 7 to 10 districts around the country basically flip and be in play going one way or the other, depending on how redistricting happens. And then whatever happens in redistricting, we have a midterm election, the first midterm election for a new president of a different party. Traditionally, that's a formula for a lot of kind of shaking up those politics in some pretty volatile elections. We're also expecting tons of lawsuits. We're already hearing threats of lawsuits, and a lot of these lawsuits are going to be around interpretations of the Voting Rights Act and whether or not districts were drawn where race or ethnicity was a predominant factor in drawing districts. And that will be for the Black community, the Latino community, the Asian community, even Alaskan Natives, Native Americans, other groups where the Voting Rights Act might come into play in different states in different ways. Local redistricting, a little bit more where the rubber meets the road in our politics. That has also been transformed. In California, the Fair Maps Act, the California Voting Rights Act, which takes at-large districts and agencies and puts them into districts. Those have transformed our local governments, and the Fair Maps Act is going to transform our redistricting. Again, going the right direction towards transparency, openness, a focus on communities of interest, and getting away from the kind of backroom deals that have driven redistricting and honestly created a lot of gerrymanders in the past and denied communities, particularly communities of color, from the opportunity to elect candidates of choice in and throughout counties and cities around the state. The fact that these rules prohibit using incumbents or candidates as a community of interest, prohibit drawing lines for partisan advantage, and require more hearings, more transparency, should create, in the end, a better process, and we hope better lines, all the way from the county and city work to school boards, community colleges, special districts, everything else. And what happens when you do the proper redistricting is you create new opportunities for new types of candidates in office. And that's actually one of the most exciting things about the local redistricting is the many, many, many people we see who are reshaping local government because of these changes that the state has led. And you see the real applied impact of those when you look at the changing face of local government. That local government redistricting, just to wrap it up, is no better seen than in the commission process. And I didn't know exactly who the other panelists were, but we have panelists who are city council members in 2 cities in the state where Redistricting Partners is working with the commissions in Long Beach and in Oakland. We're also working with commissions in San Jose and Berkeley and other places around the state, a number of counties. But this process and having people from the community that are representative of the community draw the lines is just a better starting point for the whole process. And I would encourage everybody who's watching this, they say, I want to be involved in redistricting. Well, it might be hard to change what's happening in Virginia, Arizona. It might be possible for you to, call into a commission meeting or try to advocate for your community before the statewide redistricting commission. But it's absolutely within everybody's grasp to get on the web, look for your local city county redistricting website, which is required by law now. Look for their local mapping tool, which they almost invariably will have. Draw districts, draw your community of interest, and have that input in this process, because the state and these community-based organizations that have been pushing this are putting this in your hands. It's really just up to the community now to make sure that they're taking advantage of it. And with that, I'll go ahead and close up, and happy to be part of this panel. And thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Paul, for giving us basically the crash course of redistricting 101 for us. And so now I'd like to ask our panelists to weigh on some important questions for discussion. We do want this to be a lively discussion, so just feel free to chime in at any time. So the first question I have is the scope of the California Citizens Redistricting Commission is federal and state level redistricting, as you mentioned. Given the different methods of redistricting at the local level, how do these differences in methods and mechanics affect the AAPI community as communities of interest at each level? So I see Councilmember Tao on my screen. Do you want to kick us off with this question?
Yeah, so nice to meet you, Paul. And yes, Oakland in 2014, Oakland voters, we put on, Oakland put on the ballot a measure for an independent redistricting commission. And I think that that's probably one of the best things that we could have received. And I also see that in Long Beach, they have done the same. And so this is our first time going through the Independent Redistricting Commission. We have 15 commissioners. And I think, Paul, you just kind of like nailed everything, right? I think the important part now locally is that we must participate. I think at every single level for every single city that's going through redistricting, we're at this critical point where we are amassing or trying to amass, your voices locally, the community's voices, and saying, please participate in this process. Let us know where your interest groups are, because think about it, right? It's like if you're in Chinatown and somehow Chinatown gets split up into 2 different districts, that's actually diluting the voice, diluting your voting authority and power. And so to get out to community and say, please participate in these meetings. And although everything can always be better, I think that what I have seen already that could be a downfall is the fact that we only have I think 2 community engagement opportunities, right? And so it's not a pretty big window in regards to how people can participate. But I do believe that this is the best way that we should move forward throughout this, the county, and not just the county, I'm sorry, the state as well, and throughout the nation. But in regards to how this can actually be harmful to the API community is, the redistricting did not just come up yesterday, right? We went through a census process. And I think that a lot of people's voices, we tried to capture and work with our CBOs on the ground to capture a lot of people in the census tracts. And what we're seeing that there is, like Paul has said, there's growth within different districts. And so I think that it's incredibly important that we make sure that the outreach is there so that, even though people's voices, maybe they weren't counted as part of the census or what have you, but to make sure that they do come out to be part of the redistricting process is incredibly important, especially within our AAPI communities as well. And so I will leave it at that. I know that was a really big, long question. And so I wanted to make sure I stated that, and then I will let either Suli or Paul or anybody else or Adam also chime in.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Suli Sorrow, Councilwoman of the Long Beach City Council 6th District, which is the central part of Long Beach. So it is the first time that we have passed a ballot measure DDD in 2018 to allow an independent redistricting commission determine the boundary lines. And, we have some really strange line existing because we've had council members who determined that they wanted this part in their district because they wanted their field office there. So we have one council district that looks like a whale because with a little tail in the end, because that was where his field office, he wanted it to be, right? But in our case, with the Cambodian community, with my election, I'm the first Cambodian American elected to office in Long Beach. It was a way in where, people didn't think it was possible because where the concentration of Cambodians is really in the central and split into actually almost 4 districts. So this is, and we've had actually also really vocal groups called a group called Equities for Cambodian that's really been vocal about ensuring that we're all in this, in one district, so we have a voice. And so I think that through their education and through my election and the census, it's really built up this kind of grassroots general understanding that we want representation, and the way we do it is ensuring we can vote within a district, which is an elected official. But I think that, Long Beach has started our process since the spring and doing this kind of district-wide, individual district outreach education, so people can kind of get a sense on what this new process is. And it's been challenging because it's with the layer of the pandemic, it being virtual, kind of quasi in person, the participation's been kind of low. But I feel that as we're continuing to do it, and hopefully when we get the census numbers out, there's more engagement. But there's definitely been already a lot of conversation that I think we'll touch on is, how do we do it in a fair way? And how would you do it in conjunction or in collaboration with other communities of color, so that we're also mindful what that also means when we're advocating for one community? How does that impact other? We on Long Beach website, we have this community interest map where people can kind of design their own map. And I'm looking forward to when there's actually training for people on how to do that, right? So there's a lot of education that I look forward into seeing how we're going to be able to do that to really ensure there's like grassroots local engagement.
Yeah, if I can quickly jump in, I just wanted to say thank you to both council members for sharing, what they went through and their communities, what they went through in 2012 and 2011, and Paul for the crash course. I mean, I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with this commission versus last time. And I want to say, historically, it's different. And so I'm just totally waiting to see what the outcomes will be and how the interaction will be, because the commissioners are definitely different from last time, and the process will be different. And like what Paul said, based on how they were picked this time, I just hope that voices will be heard this time, because I know we'll go into it later on, but in 2012 and 2011, it was definitely an upward in the city of LA and parts of LA County. So when we get into that, I'll definitely share that as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in my 2 cents on this. And LA is another interesting one, although we are doing the redistricting in LA. So I'm not going to be able to speak to any of the really fun ones, unfortunately. But on the state level, the last commission did something that I don't think the legislature would have done, which is they created the 49th Assembly District in San Gabriel Valley as the first Asian majority minority legislative district in the continental United States. And it's very likely that in this redistricting, they'll create the first Asian majority minority congressional district in the continental United States. That is because the commission is focused as they are on these communities and on ensuring fair, effective representation, particularly for minority populations who may in other cases be having their votes diluted by the structure of districts. And so this commission, I think, at the statewide level is definitely going to be looking at that. And there's some real thought leaders in the kind of Asian political research world. Sarah Sadwani stands out. If you Google her, she's done amazing work and research on the racially polarized voting among the members of the Asian community, looking both at instances where certain Asian populations might vote in concert with each other in some elections, and then based on nationality might vote in different ways in other elections. And it's a real kind of subtle part of the Voting Rights Act when it comes to ensuring that the Asian community has fair, effective districts and has their voting rights ensured. So she, among with others on the commission, I think will really have an eye towards those communities instead of, I mean, God bless members of the legislature, some of whom are our friends and who come to these presentations. But if they had the pen, there'd be a lot of other things that came into play, right? And these commissioners, I think, are free of those constraints. And hopefully, like the local commissions, will be able to draw districts that can be effective for minority communities.
Thank you for that. And I actually do want to touch on something that I think each of you had mentioned, which is what happened in 2012, right? So how did redistricting affect your local communities in 2012? And what are some lessons learned for this round as we're going through redistricting now?
I can go for LA. I want to say that LA definitely is so unique, right? I mean, you can say it's close to NorCal, but Los Angeles, in the city of Los Angeles, you have city council districts that were drawn and congressionals and Senate and assembly seats that were definitely drawn. And I think you have really outstanding communities, which is like Chinatown, Little Tokyo, historic Filipino town, Thai town, and Koreatown. And I think it would be a dream to see those communities under one representative that's API, from each level, from the local, county, to the state and congressional. But it took a lot of nonprofits to really speak out at these hearings at that time. And I remember how vocal it was. And it took like Little Tokyo Service Center, Korean American Coalition Los Angeles, SIPA, which is search to involve Filipino Americans, Chinatown Service Center, Thai CDC. They were at the forefront trying to get our community to speak out to make sure that their communities were being represented. And I think the drawback of one community that was hit the hardest was Koreatown. And I think this time, those communities are ready to speak out, because having multiple representatives in that district really disheartens the services for those constituents. In addition to that, having multiple elected officials that don't really understand those communities really sets back a lot of the cultural, ethnicity, and historical stuff that really happens in those communities as well. So that's just a quick wrap up on City of LA.
Yeah, and I can also speak in regards to what took place in 2012 and what the consequences and what we kind of learned from that too in Oakland. I do want to pause for a moment, and I do want to acknowledge and press all of us on this call to not only send our prayers, but also to do whatever we can to help our Afghan refugee brothers and sisters who are fleeing persecution at this very moment. I know that there are some of us on this call who have family out there. And so I wanted to take a moment because, it's like, people are fighting for their lives, and it's almost like we're here talking about redistricting. Not that it's not important, but I want to make sure that we uplift that as well and take that moment. So, in regards to redistricting in 2012, we didn't have an independent commission. So what happened was the city council worked with city staff and consultants to actually draw the boundaries. And I think that everybody can already allude to what could take place. I think that Suli, you had mentioned, there's a district that's drawn kind of like, did you say a whale or a dolphin or something like that? And so what we're seeing is that, so I represent District 4, which is the most affluent district in the city of Oakland. I represent the Oakland Hills. And so what you get is districts of have and have nots, right? And so you'll have a district who, I think the idea is to really create some sort of like mixed community, but the district that I represent is just majority affluent, more wider community. And I think that could be problematic in regards to going back to like who you have as a representation. And we do have district seats as elected seats. And so, something that I can compare it to is saying, I know that some cities have at-large seats. And so when the city of Oakland, when we were doing our election at an at-large level instead of the district levels, we were seeing that Latinos and African Americans were shut out of politics completely. Like they were not getting voted into their seats, their voices, the Black community and the Latino communities, their voices were not being heard politically. And therefore, there goes the power, right? And so I think that, I'm actually very supportive of having an independent redistricting commission, having the politicians stay out of it so there's not a gain to it, but really having community hear community voices. And I think that's what it comes back to, is that just to having a fair process. In Alameda County, which is the county that Oakland is in, they currently do not have an independent commission for redistricting. And so they are still redistricting themselves. And even if you say it out loud, it sounds crazy that we're allowing people in power to already create, who an invisible line around who they represent, right? And so, so I would say that I think, the illusion is the fact that there were a lot of voices that were left out. It created a lot of haves and have-nots, and a lot of disparities between, the wage gaps, and a lot of disparities in between socioeconomic income. And then that also ripples into a lot of disparities in resources, right? Certain parks in certain areas it looks a lot better. Schools in certain areas are a lot better. And so that becomes.
So I I actually in 2012 was the or was it 2011? I think at that time when the Redistricting Commission were doing their tour, I was the executive director of an organization called Khmer Girls in Action, and worked with APCON 3 at that time to speak up in Long Beach to ensure that we keep the Cambodian community together, because currently I represent a district that is very diverse as far as race, religion, age, right? And Cambodia Town right now, we have a designation here in Long Beach. It's split in half into 2 districts. So there isn't more of a better example of community interest in this coming time around to putting it together, right? But at the same time, we are also dealing with historically Black community members who feel that I am the first non-Black Black African American council member for the first time in many decades. And so we're having some conversation right now. What does it mean when the community is shifting as well, right? The identity of the community, African American, that were redlined into this area that had no other option. And so there's a certain legacy there that is surfacing, right? That is kind of changing because of the population. It's becoming more Latino, more Asian, and so that is the conversation, I think, about how do we do this in a way around it being fair and representational, right? But at the end of the day, part of what I always go back to is around the issue. How do we ensure that this district, which has the highest rate of employment, the highest rate of violence and gut shooting, the highest rate of disparities, it's, for me, I focus back on that as far as being a representative, and obviously making sure that it's reflective also at the same time of the population in that area. And that's why I'm also so glad that it's out of our hands as elected to determine the line. And we have very vocal community groups having those discussions. And I think this is the way that we should move it, right? And having it be a democratic process to allow community members to determine that.
Great, thank you for that. And I think that kind of lends into naturally the next question that we have is, what are the biggest challenges for redistricting at the federal and state level in California for this year? And on the same note, what are the challenges on the local level as well for redistricting?
Can you repeat that question again?
Sorry. What are the biggest challenges for redistricting at the federal and state level in California this year? And then the follow-up to that is, what about the local level? What are the challenges to redistricting at the local level, given that it's also almost a completely different system?
Well, I'm happy to take a first stab at this. And what I think is, there's 2 challenges I think that really jump out at when we look at the national level and we look at all the redistricting reform that's happening now. One is that politics is going to creep its way back in. In some states, the structures of these redistricting commissions is basically set up so that the politicians get to have a commission, and then in the end of the day, they can roll it back and just undo the work of the commission. They can say, oh, we did a good job, but really they just let the politics seep in. And then we end up with the same kind of redistricting. It's just that there was this like window dressing for a little while that kind of hid some of the redistricting. And so that's a concern. And the other is honestly apathy. We've created processes where the public can be engaged. Will they show up? And then even the groups that are very, very engaged, like we've worked a lot with, some of our clients are Common Cause. We've worked with the Advancement Project. We've worked with AJLA, and we've worked with MALDEF and ACLU. And like, how much capacity do they have to do concurrently a statewide redistricting commission, and then the Orange County redistricting, and then the Riverside redistricting, and then this city council, and that city council, and this school board, and that water district? There's a capacity issue. And the fear, I think, and I've had this expressed to me from some of the leadership of those organizations, is that we've set up a great process, but then we walk away from it kind of at the most important time. You know, while we're talking, I'm just kind of scrolling through some websites, and the city of Pasadena has their redistricting in Pasadena basically was every council member wanted to have a part of the Rose Parade route, you know, and that's what they drew. And it didn't represent the minority communities in the city. It was an amenity gerrymander. They gerrymandered so they could all have, you know, good Rose Parade tickets. And their website has 2 maps that have been drawn. In LA, where we're working on it, we've had the mapping tool up for a week and we've got like 30. So the engagement that we want to see in these local jurisdictions has to come from people. And even when I'm doing the work of the, you know, as the demographer for a commission, even when I'm advising the commission or working with the legal counsel in a city or county, I can't pull people in and have them draw maps and have them come testify. That's not my job. But other people have to pick up that mantle and run. And so I think those are 2 kind of the biggest threats to the entire reform movement. My fear is we go into 2030 and people are like, yeah, those commissions were nuts and we're not going to do that again. And I'd prefer we see the opposite, which is we go into 2030 and everybody's like, commissions for everyone. Let's take the power away from elected officials to draw the districts and let's move it into the public space. Now, there can still be politics in the public space, right? But it's in the public space, just like there's politics when you're passing a hillside ordinance. There's politics when you're trying to advocate for a housing reform in local government. There's politics when you're trying to advocate for bills in the legislature. When all that stuff's out in the public, there's still going to be politics, but it is out in front. Everybody's able to participate, and the people who are decision makers are not the ones who are going to benefit directly from the outcomes.
Yeah, I wanted to say the same thing like what Paul said. It's all about the marketing and education piece of it and who gets, I don't know how it works. I don't know how it works this time, but I remember in 2011 and 12, it depends who gets the dollars to do the education piece as well. And so you have money spent on elections and like recalls like this, but no one's talking about the redistricting piece of it. And so, and maybe there's an ethnic piece of it as well, because how many API congressional members are there? And because no one really knows about it, maybe it's really not that important to them. So there's other factors as well. But I think it comes down to how is the commission spending on dollars? How is the federal department spending on dollars on educating the population about how this is being done and how you can participate? Because automatically community leaders and activists are aware of it, but does your mom and dad know? Does your brothers and sisters know? You know, does your local school know? No, they don't know. So it's all about the communication and education piece of it. And yeah.
I would add on the local piece that it's a little bit different in how we're learning how we can get involved, right? Because it is an independent redistricting commission. We cannot influence the process. So I'm trying to figure out where can I help with education without influencing the process, right? So I think that I'm still learning what that fine line is. So for now, I'm always just kind of asking what people's thoughts are and making sure they know about the tools, making sure that they're, you know, translated in the various language that we need. But that's something that I am trying to figure out to ensure that the groups on the, you know, our community members and community orgs know about what's happening. As involved as they were with the census, they should too with the redistricting. And I think that it's a little bit different this year because like the census, the pandemic's really taken attention away, as well as the recall, right? Recall's a layer. I think the strategy adds to not just the recall of our governor, but to impact our redistricting process as well, right? I mean, while redistricting is a longer timeline, it's taking time, money, and energy away from what we would normally do in redistricting into this recall process, right? So I want to acknowledge that too, that that's a layer of challenge because we only have so much resource and time, and we're losing it because of this recall.
I think that's actually a really great point that I don't think people have made that connection, council member, that when we're spending time on a very, very special election, that historically would have a low turnout, and doing redistricting at the same time, how dangerous that can be and the impacts to the community there. I do want to zero in to something that Paul, you mentioned earlier about apathy. And I definitely can see that because, you know, compared to even how the census was rolled out in previous years, people don't really know what redistricting is, right? So I think my follow-up question for everyone here, is it an education aspect that needs to be had with our communities of what redistricting is? Do people know what that is, or do they just simply don't care?
I can start kicking off for this question. I think that, you know, so in the city of Oakland, with the independent commission itself, I think that the process of education should have started right when we were picking our selection panels for who will be the ones who would choose the commissioners, right? And I think that it is through education, but it's not only through education from politicians. You know, there is a mistrust of government, you know, for some families. And so it's really, you know, getting funding to those CBOs that work directly with the communities, you know, those nonprofits that work directly with communities, whether it's like Asian Health Services or what have you, to hold these educational processes, you know, and, you know, so hearing from people who look the same as you, hearing from people who you work with day in and day out in the community, to really ensure and to really educate folks about how important this was. I think folks did a pretty good job in regards to the census, right? Really getting the census out, and we heard about it within the communities, even monolingual communities and what have you. So that was important. And then I think that after that, the census was important because we knew that 2020 was going to be when we'd redistrict. And then when it became after the census, I felt like there was a drop off of like exhaustion. And then there was no more education around like what we were collecting that data, and then now we're doing step 2. And so there wasn't a larger focus on the step 2, which is like educating what is redistricting and why it is so incredibly important to come out and have your voices heard. Because again, the process goes right back to being mute if there's no participation from the community. And I think that that's a part of it too. And so you know, really having that activation, but getting that information out to the people by folks and organizations that the people trust.
Yeah, I totally agree with what she just said about all of that. I'm gonna play devil's advocate though and say that hopefully this year, unfortunately with the pandemic, now that we're virtual, I'm hopeful that there's more participation because we're virtual. In the past, there were issues in 2011 and 12 because certain meetings were being held where it wasn't that accessible or close enough for certain communities of color to go to, right? I mean, in LA, it was at City Hall, that's fine, but can everybody go there from San Gabriel Valley? Can they go there from the Valley, you know? Can they go there from the West Side? So I'm just hopeful for devil's advocate that being virtual is gonna be, so we have a better turnout.
I think, Adam, that's a great point. I think especially once when a lot of public meetings became virtual, a lot of ways, for example, public comment, you can now submit your public comment over email, or you can call in. And so it really does bring out the accessibility piece of it that you're talking about. So hopefully that will be reflected in redistricting as well. Another question I have here is, and Paul, you had this a little bit in your presentation earlier when we were kicking off. So at the federal level, California lost 1 US House seat, going from 53 to 52. How will this affect the AAPI community and AAPI electoral representation? And I know you mentioned that it may create the first minority majority seat of APIs for a congressional seat. So just want to get everyone's thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. I don't want to get too in the weeds, I guess, with this, but we are going to lose a congressional seat. The population growth in like the Inland Empire and parts of the Bay Area will, and the lack of population growth at the same rate in particularly LA County creates these like pressures, vacuums, and like pushing and pulling of these districts. Now, when we look at the two areas that have the largest concentration of Asian community that could constitute potential congressional districts, those would be in kind of the San Jose area and the San Gabriel Valley. There are other obviously large Asian populations in Orange County that may be a third population that could be large enough to be somewhat influential in a district the size of a congressional district, but not to be the size potentially of a close to majority minority type of district. I think that those communities that are really the focus of the commission, those communities of interest, and then majority minority communities, I think are the ones that are going to be the least impacted by this population change and the loss of a congressional district. And I think that those effects will essentially move further away from those seats. So I think that even though we're going to lose a congressional district in the redistricting process, that the Asian community should leave the process of drawing the new 52 districts in a better position than it is now, reflective both of the growing Asian population in those more Asian communities and the fact that it makes the redistricting portion of that easier, and then also the mindset of the commissioners and the way that they've been talking about many of these communities.
Thank you for that, Paul. Council members, did you want to weigh in, or Adam? All right. Our next question is, what is the one important thing for the AAPI community to do at this point to make sure its voice is heard in the redistricting process?
I think we beat this one down a lot. Is, tell your family, tell your friends, call people who are close to you, who trust your word. It's incredibly important. If you have listservs, send out a listserv to your database. I'm sending out that information to all of my constituents as well. And, host a town hall meeting if you can, or, have a, educational workshop, if you can, via Zoom, make it fun, but just getting the word out so that people can participate in a timely manner, and educating them around why it's so incredibly important, that it could mean dilution of your vote and dilution of power and authority over what you care about.
I would like to add that in addition to the way that we do the education, is that it really needs to start locally so people really understand how that directly impacts them. And I used that example earlier, is that the Cambodian community now has a better understanding because of the work done by grassroots groups, that we want to keep the Cambodia town intact and certain neighborhoods intact so we have a stronger voice. And I think it's just building on that story around, now as an example, with my election, we want to keep having representation. So what I am at least doing is having conversation with community leaders to making sure that people understand, and how do we come together to actually submit a community interest form, and how do we do a mapping together that can be the same for others and to encourage others. So getting kind of these template process going so that you don't have to completely start from scratch, but you can work off a draft that a group has started. That keeps me out of trouble, and it also ensures that we're getting community voices heard. And I think that also, it's important that the local, state, and federal, I think, electeds also communicate, because I'm not paying attention to state and federal boundaries. So it's helpful for me to learn too what's happening at these levels. So I can also, so please help at the state level, please help us organize as local folks so that we can be kind of in tune as well, because we're trying to get our local stuff going. So I would say that let's coordinate on those levels so that we know how to also support the process as well, that's going to benefit the AAPI community.
Yeah, I agree. I think that everyone is going through this process at the same time, and if we can, especially for our community, I think if we can communicate together and work together so that we don't duplicate efforts or pull resources in together, so that when it's the next phase from the local to the county to the state to congressional, we're just going to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, instead of starting from scratch or doing things new. I think the last one in 2012, she's set us up for success for this time. And so we're just going to hopefully work together as a group, and having meetings like this, and if not, just participating on your own and calling in and attending virtually will definitely help But yeah, we need to do the coordinated effort and do this together and not just do the city and then we're done and then not think about the county and not the state because, you know, we're all residents of those different levels.
Yeah, and I think that you need to, when you're communicating with these agencies, so let's use the state as an example. I won't get into trouble talking about the state redistricting. When you're communicating about your community of interest, this state, you need to talk about who your community is. You need to be able to identify its footprint in a way that can help, you know, what you want to do is provide a footprint that can be put into a potential district, and then communicate why that community is important for the redistricting for that agency. So if you're talking about a federal issue at a congressional level, a state issue at a legislative district level, you know, really trying to relate that. And you have to be concerned that you might have a situation. We had a situation in the San Fernando Valley in the last redistricting where they had a commission meeting and like one or two groups came from, you know, the Armenian community and the API community, and then maybe somebody from the Latino community, and then a line out the door of 400 people from some housing development community up in Simi Valley. And like, you can have these groups that try to kind of swamp the field with, you know, their interests, and it can subjugate the interests of some of those communities who are traditionally the disenfranchised communities. And that's what commissions and folks doing redistricting have to have a finely tuned ear to be able to understand that. But you want to make sure that the redistricting, that your voices are being heard. And sometimes that might mean getting multiple people to go to the state redistricting commission meeting and repeating those messages over and over, and basically trying to fight to make sure that you're not going to be forgotten in the process, because, you know, some Simi Valley or, you know, whatever homeowners association comes in and makes a big stink. So it's just really important to make sure that you're engaged, and that when you do get into the process that you're doing everything you can to do that. And I also understand it shouldn't be the elected officials doing this. It really does depend on the folks who are on this Zoom and watching here today that are part of community-based organizations or just individuals who feel passionate about their community and can help, you know, make these changes.
Right, thank you for that. And as our last question is, how do folks learn more about the redistricting process and become more engaged in this process? So what are some resources that you can share for them to do that?
Draw lines.
Well, I mean, I would say that I'm not, I can certainly share what the local Long Beach process is. And I, you know, not sure as far as, I would say that, you know, sometimes that's more digestible is seeing what your city's process is, and then how is that connected with the state and federal rights. So even I, just honestly, as a local elected, I'm not even sure what's happening at the state. So I'm also, you know, interested in what that resource is to connect to what's happening on the local, but certainly on the city level, I can, you know, we have a website and all of that stuff.
For almost all these agencies, somebody just put the Draw My California Community link into the chat. You can draw your community for the statewide redistricting page, the site. You can draw your community in multiple local redistrictings. You can go in and define where you are on a map. You can submit that to the agency. You can also like email it to all your friends and tell them to go on and submit it to the agency, or put it up on Twitter. You know, there's actually not as much kind of noise happening out there as I might expect. You should be able to search on Twitter, you know, redistricting in certain city and see all these people's maps that they've promoted and communities of interest that they're out there promoting. It's out in the open space for people to kind of grab that opportunity. Drawing maps is a great way. It's actually a very fun way to get involved.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And I want to thank you all for sharing your expertise with us today. So to close, I'd like to give each of you just a few minutes to share your parting thoughts with our caucus. So Councilmember Saro, do you want to kick us off first?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for having me just be part of this panel to really make sure that we have this discussion on redistricting, given that there's so many polling priorities, and also just really heart-wrenching things that are happening in Afghanistan as well as in Hades, right? With they had an earthquake, and so I think it's great that we start this conversation and that we continue to figure out what's the best way to organize ourselves from all of these different levels. And so it's getting me thinking on other levels too. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Tao?
Sure. Thank you so much to the API Caucus for hosting us tonight. I think this is the key, right? The key is getting, not just like our community groups who have the special interests, who are like, we're alike, whether it's our ethnic or ethnicity or what have you, that we shouldn't be redistricted, but also here as people who are very involved in politics, people who are involved in the community, that we have this space for us to really come together, to like share ideas, bounce ideas off of each other. Like, what are you doing to get the, to get information out? Because we are the people who are, who can be possible gatekeepers too, right, of information. And so when we hold this information, we need to come together and create space like this where we can really share ideas, and then really, take those ideas and figure out how we can best disseminate that information, whether it's through CBOs, elected officials, or what have you. And so I just appreciate being here with you all. It is a pleasure, and I am open to always coming back if you would have me. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, do you want to share?
I'm just, thanks for having me. This is an exciting time. There's been a decade of work trying to change the redistricting process at the local level in states around the country. We have a great opportunity. Our company, Redistricting Partners, is working in a number of different jurisdictions around the state and the country. And it's just really thrilling to see so much from kind of that community organizing space, so much opportunity. But again, I don't want to sound like Debbie Downer, but we really need to see that follow through from those organizations and from people to take advantage. It's like we're leaving political power out on the street corner, and just people need to pick it up, and they need to make sure that they use it in the next, mostly 6 months. The next few months are really going to drive a lot in the statewide redistricting process. A lot of local redistricting is going to go through April of next year. So I would encourage you and the organizations that you're involved with to do everything you can to make sure your voice is heard.
Great. Thank you, Paul. And Adam?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for sharing their thoughts and their experiences and what the plan would be. It's really important for groups like us. We're the caucus from the Dem Party, but it takes groups like us to open up these conversations, because again, like we just talked about, one of the questions, how come no one's talking about it? Where's the resources, right? So I hope someone that is attending today takes note on that and host another meeting like this to open up the discussion and show them the resources where they can go to help draw the line, help give some feedback, voice their concerns, because it is really important and no one's really talking about it. So thank you to all of you guys in the caucus, and Olivia for organizing all of this. I appreciate it. And Paul, Glendale High School, it was only a couple of years ago. I did nitros, and so.
CV. My brother went to Glendale though.
See?
Thank you, Adam. And thank you again all for being part of this panel. We've learned a lot, so appreciate you being part of our caucus today. Deepa, back to you.
Thank you so much. That was really informative. I'm so grateful. This is the first meeting of our term, and it's, really great that we had such great, informative panelists here talking to us about how to take power from off the street. Paul Mitchell, thank you so much. Thank you, council members, Saro and Shang Tao. And thank you, Legislative Director Olivia Lee, for really such a great discussion. Before we adjourn, I do want to recognize a few folks. I want to recognize Mayor Pro Tem and immediate past Chair Melissa Ramoso. Thank you for being here. I want to recognize Sonia Logman Harris. She was the Rising Star Award recipient for our caucus a few years ago. I want to recognize CDP staff. Danielle Damper, thank you so much for your assistance. But before we adjourn, I want to give the floor to Mayor of Monterey Park, Ms. Yvonne Yu. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Oh, let's unmute. Okay, great.
Hi, can you all hear me? I know you guys are ending, so I have to catch up with the time. I'm currently at the ICA conference and heading to the dinner as well. So good evening, Democrats. My name is Yvonne Yu, and I'm currently serve as a mayor of Monterey Park and candidate of California State Controller next year. I wanted to say for the No Recall campaign, in addition to our efforts, I also, along with my husband, also make the largest donation ever personally to the No Recall campaign, even though I need money at the same time, where I need to raise a few $1 million on my own campaign as a state controller. But I know this contribution to Newsom is so necessary. And I would like to share a story. Since we actually make a good amount of donations, Governor Newsom invited my husband and a few big donors to a private Zoom call. And Governor Newsom said he was actually living in an RV, the trailer, which allowed him to travel around the whole California for a long period of time. So if Governor Newsom is working that hard, we should all work hard for him. In California, we have about $76 billion in budget surplus this year. And Governor Newsom actually has done a very good job providing funding to rebuild our economy, education, and homelessness, and affordable housing. I think everyone should try their best to contribute, no matter time or money. I also like that Christine Pelosi said to show our power, Democrats. And I know together we can do it. And lastly, to me, I'm a mother of three. First generation immigrants from Hong Kong. And before running for office, I have over 25 years experience in finance. I'm a big advocate of immigrants, women, community of colors, and for those who have challenges to achieve American dreams. And please visit my website, my full name, YvonneYu.com. And I will also leave my contact information in the chat. Thank you. I look forward to meeting all of you soon. Thanks for the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so it is 7:01. I like to entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor, please say aye. All right. Well, our meeting is adjourned at 7:01. Thank you all so much for being here.
Record.